I would like to now introduce our first guest speaker, Professor Joseph Anthony Camilleri. Professor Camilleri is Emeritus Professor at La Trobe University, where he held a chair in international relations. He was founding director of Center of Dialogue at Trobe University. Professor Joseph Camilleri is also managing director of Alexandria Agenda, a new venture in ethical consulting offering services in the area of sustainability, diversity, and education. He has written some 20 major books and more than 100 book chapters and journal articles. Recent publications include the UN Alliance of Civilization in Asia South Pacific, Current Context and Future Pathways, Culture, Religion, and Conflict in Muslim Southeast Asia, Human Security Matters, Religion and Ethics in the Globalizing World, Conflict, Dialogue and Transformation, World in Transition, Evolving Governance Across a Stressed Planet, and many more. Professor Camilleri is a Fellow of the Australian Academy of Social Science. He has researched, lectured, and given evidence to government and other inquiries on the issues of governance, human rights, cultural and religious dialogue, development, environment, and security. He is a recipient of several awards, including the Order of Australia Medal. Personally, I had a pleasure to be part of the Australian Leadership Program, sponsored by Centre of Dialogue and Islamic Council of Victoria, where I had the opportunity to learn a lot from Professor Camilleri. AMAFHH Federation is extremely delighted to have Professor Camilleri accept our invitation, and without further ado, please join me in welcoming Professor Joseph Camilleri.
Thank you very much. It's a great honor to be here for this breaking of the fast in the holy month of Ramadan, and to do it and sharing that with you. I suppose this is meant to be a very special month of the year for Muslims, but I think non-Muslims would lose very little to share in what is unique and special about that month. Of course, it is a month of fasting. It is a month of prayer, but I think possibly most importantly, it is a month of spiritual reflection. For Muslims, no doubt, it is reflection about getting closer to God. But getting closer to God also means getting closer to one's fellow human beings. The two cannot be separated. And I think it's important, as we think about this particular month of Ramadan in 2015, to locate it in the times in which we live. Of course, one has to be concerned about one's own group, one's own family, children, parents, partners, relatives, friends. But one can't leave it there. That is nowhere near enough. It's not even the beginning, let alone the end. We have to think about the world in which we live and the country in which we live. And I just want to share a couple of thoughts with you on that theme, because I think it is of immense interest and importance to Muslims, but it is of immense importance and interest to all people of faith, and indeed to those who may have no religious faith. I said a moment ago, we live in troubled times. And yes, no doubt, we live in a country that is not perhaps as troubled as some other parts of the world. But I want to tell you one thing for sure, it is nevertheless a deeply troubled country. deeply troubled, don't believe the political nonsense. What a beautiful country we live in. Yes, it's beautiful. Yes, there are many good things about it, undoubtedly. But we are deeply troubled, just like the rest of the world. And I'll just say a couple of words as to why I think this is the case. I don't know whether any of you have had the opportunity to watch the 3 programs of the last 3 weeks on the ABC, the killing season. Has anyone watched them? Anyone? A few? Those of you that haven't, should. Because that tells you about the political life of this country over a 6-year period. And there is one thing which stands out above everything else. It is a deep and intense hatred of one politician towards another. You could see it, the body language. Just see it. And that continues right to the present. We have in Australia the unresolved, deeply unresolved relationship between Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians. We have a country whose environment is being destroyed as we speak, right now. One of the world's greatest destructive acts in human history is taking place in Australia. It's taking place in Australia. I don't know whether many of you have had the opportunity to at least have a look at the recent encyclical published by Pope Francis on the environment, addressed mostly to people of faith, in particular to Muslims and Christians, because between them they make 80% of the people of faith in this world. And the same story. Exactly what he said. Australia is very much part of it. He said, we are reducing God's creation to a pile of filth. Filth. That's the reality. And if one doesn't reflect on this in the month of Ramadan, when's one going to do it? This is the time. So, there are 2 issues. We know, of course, there are many deep conflicts going on in different parts of the world, not least in the Middle East. And we know that in one way or another, Australia is involved. And 2 thoughts occur to me in that respect. People of faith must, it seems to me, if they are going to be faithful to their beliefs, and that's true of all the religious faiths, must assert one principle. Many principles, but one must figure prominently. The killing must stop. And nothing is more horrendous than Muslims killing Muslims. That has to stop. But it's not just the killing. Because you could say only a few do the killing. The actual killing, only a few do it. But we have to ask the questions about attitudes and mindsets, mistrust and suspicion. Mistrust and suspicion. And we have to ask of the 200,000 Muslims in Victoria, is mistrust and suspicion within totally absent? I pose the question. We need to think about this. So it's not just the dialogue of faiths. Very importantly, intra-faith dialogue is very important. This is true of Christians. It is true of those of Jewish or Hindu persuasion. It's true of Muslims. The mistrust must stop. There is no other option. Whether it be Sunni or Shia, whether it be on cultural basis, ethnic background, language background, whatever it may be, the mistrust and the suspicion must stop. If Ramadan means anything at all, it must mean that. And there is a second point, which I have. So there is the question of how one deals with conflict, or with differences of view. We are all entitled to have our different views, whether they be political, whether they be religious, but it's a question of how one conducts oneself and whether one can accept the other person's fundamental humanity, irrespective of cultural, religious, or political difference. The respect of the dignity of the human person. Okay. And that, I think, requires intense discussion on all the sensitive questions, the difficult questions, not the easy ones. We pat ourselves on the back often of how we, for example, in the state of Victoria, are doing quite well, and indeed we are doing better than perhaps other states. How interfaith dialogue is relatively doing well. But I've been to many of these interfaith dialogue sessions, hundreds of them. They're usually on safe issues, easy bits, nice cups of tea. It's very nice. But what about the hard questions, the sensitive questions, the difficult ones, which make people embarrassed? They are not being dealt with yet enough. So there's a lot to do. And in all of this, it seems to me, and that's my final comment, education is critical. If you were to ask me, what is the major problem confronting humanity today? It's that basically people are uneducated. They're uneducated. They might have a university degree, but they're uneducated. They don't know the first thing about the world in which we live. Many people, they only feel comfortable in their little corner, in their little area, in their little home, in their little cluster of friends. But the world as a whole passes them by. And yet we live in a globalized world. We live in the world of the internet. We have no option but to make the world our stage. In fact, if it's not our stage, whose stage will it be? So we have to be concerned about all of the big issues of our time. They have to be an integral part of our life. And I think in a month of spiritual reflection, this is very important. Spirituality and religion, devoid of education, is a fraud. And I have no qualms about saying it openly in public. I come from a Christian background, and I say that to every church I ever speak at. Religion, divorced from education, is a fraud. Because to be uneducated is an option, and we cannot possibly take up. So, I think this is a very good opportunity for us to be thinking about the society in which we live, the culture in which we live, the many religious and cultural traditions that are represented, and whether in fact we are able not only to say that we celebrate the difference, but that we can in fact feel comfortable with the difference, take advantage of the difference, make use of the difference, and on the basis of that dialogue amongst those who are different, build something constructive. Something that can assist us in the journey that we are travelling at this point in time of human history, the second decade of the 21st century. So with these thoughts, let me simply pass on to all of you, each and every one of you, regardless of your backgrounds, interests and commitments, to pass on to you the blessings of this special month, and may they bring you peace, health, and spiritual growth in every way conceivable.